Honorable Minister of Law, my friend Dr. Veerappa Moily. I think that was a magnum opus of a vision of both legal education and how we will integrate with the rest of the globe in our aspiration to impress upon the global movements the special place for India and the contribution that India seeks to make. Chancellor of the University, my very good friend, and I believe truly a visionary and a dreamer in a very young age, whether it's for the Indian flag or it is for Indian business or indeed for advancement of intellect in our country, Mr. Naveen Jindal. Professor Richard Levin, our distinguished guest today, President of Yale University, and I think a very, very good friend to our country and particularly to the intellectuals of our country. Professor Rajkumar, your visionary Vice-Chancellor, and indeed, as he reminds me, an old friend from times gone by. Professor Peter Shook, who was obviously part of the intellectual brick and mortar of this university, and I hope will continue to be associated for a very, very, very long time to come. Professor Malv Menon, for all of us, a doyen for legal thinking in our country, and it's so good to see him vigorously look in his early 50s, and I hope that you continue in good health for a very long time. Ramesh Kaushik ji, CBI Director, Mr. Ashwini Kumar, Mr. N. Ravi from the Hindu, Dr. Sanjeev Sani, Professor D.K. Srivastava, and members of faculty, distinguished friends, ladies and gentlemen. And I was hearing various very distinguished speakers address you, and time was ticking away, and I thought, are we going to stretch it a little bit so that the Chief Minister has an opportunity to get here in time, or should we stick to the indication that Professor Shook gave, that at least the globalization contribution that the United States of America can make to us is to ensure that we get things moving much faster, on time, on schedules, and a theme that was picked up by the Law Minister about justice having to be done speedily and quickly, which is a great effort that we are making. However, I think it's such a wonderful moment here, and I must say that I feel very honored to be with all of you. And I was thinking of what is the best thing that I can say about this beautiful new university. And a couplet came to mind. Many of you know Hindustani, so you will be able to understand it. Some of you who will need a translation, I'll do a translation for them as well. And the couplet goes like this: Meri aankh band thi jab talak, mere samne noore jamal tha, khuli aankh meri to na khabar rahi, wo khwab tha ya khayal tha. With my eyes shut, I was faced with a beacon of awe, and on those beautiful words, the Chief Minister arrived. I think on a cue, please welcome him. So welcome, Chief Minister. You entered to my couplet. Meri aankh band thi jab talak, mere samne noore jamal tha, khuli aankh meri to na khabar rahi, wo khwab tha ya khayal tha. With my eyes shut, I was faced with a beacon of awe, but upon opening my eyes, I continued to wonder if it was a dream or a great vision. And I think these are the words with which I believe this university should be greeted. Is it a dream or is it a great vision? And the visionary and the team of the visionary is here, and I believe that you're all really, really lucky to have such a wonderful university to be attending your undergraduate and your graduate courses in. This is a conference on globalization, and I think a review of how globalization is both a challenge and an opportunity has been, I think, very wonderfully been presented to you by the Law Minister. I'm looking at some of the sessions that you will have, and there's a session in which I have a particular interest, and I see if I will actually make it to that session, and that's the session on equality. Your session on inequality and exclusion, Professor Madhav Menon has made a major contribution in submitting a report to the government on the setting up of an equality commission. And I would just take that theme, the theme of how, when we globalize, and we globalize intellectually, how we take different ideas that have been nurtured in different jurisdictions on soil of different countries, nations, who have their respective histories, and how those ideas have grown today to be available to a larger group of people, and indeed globally. Equality is one such idea. Equity is another such idea. The very idea of fairness, the very idea of moral accountability, the right and wrong, the right to choose, the right not to choose. And I think there's some really, really very, very challenging fields here. I'm thinking of jurisprudential work of people like John Rawls and the young lady who accompanied me from my home to the university this morning. We had a chance to discuss ideas of Professor Amartya Sen and John Rawls, Professor Dawkins, and taking rights seriously. And I think many of those ideas that have developed in liberal American democracy are ideas that can really be tested to an extreme in India. And the whole concept of just deserts and the qualification on one's capacity, capability, disability issues that Professor Amartya Sen has introduced in his critique of John Rawls offers, I believe, the greatest challenge to globalization. And that will be the nuts and bolts of how we proceed with globalization as it comes. Of course, there are negotiations, there are competing interests and conflicts, and we are accustomed to that in international law. Perceptions of people and country and civilizations have sometimes conflicted, sometimes confronted each other, sometimes converged, and sometimes agreed to disagree. But what is essential is that if we are moving towards a global landscape for everything we do in terms of human endeavor, not just the working rules, the rules of the game that we play, but also our understanding of concepts, moral, sociological, and political concepts. And I do believe, and I'm sure that those of you who are familiar with the work of American scholars will know that language has a lot to do with morality. And those of you who have looked at Wittgenstein and H.L.A. Hart and have looked at how language plays a role in analysis of what we deserve, what we should do, what our culpability and what our accountability is, language plays a major role. And I want to just leave this as a challenge to all of you. I do not have the good fortune to be at a university anymore. I wish I could leave everything I'm doing to be at a university once again. I think the best years, the years of joy that I have spent were at university, both as a student and as faculty. But you have to move out sometimes, and once moved away, far away from university, I hope one day I have time enough to come and at least teach a little bit here at your beautiful university. But when I consider some of these ideas, I think it would be an interesting challenge for some of you to work on the relationship between ideas and language. Can ideas exist without language, or do ideas need a language? And that's why I use the couplet that sometimes you cannot tell what is reality and what is a dream because you don't know what language you dream in. Most people ask us, Moiliji, what language do you dream in? It's difficult to answer. I always say I'm a bilingual dreamer. I dream a little bit in English and a little bit in Hindustani. But we don't know. We don't know whether there is a language of dreams or dreams are beyond language. And therefore, the whole thing about how you develop ideas which are shared ideas, and here I think the idea of equality, the idea of fairness, the idea of justice, the idea of justice between generations, the idea of sustainability, the idea of accountability in most systems of economics now, interdependability on economic systems, on currencies. In India today, we are facing a very special challenge. There was a time when we faced the challenge of paucity of foreign exchange. Today we are facing the challenge of a glut of foreign exchange. There's a lot of investment coming into India. And our economists, Professor Levin would know, our economists are having to work out strategies about should we put some barriers to inflow of foreign direct investment, although our instincts will tell us in the streets that foreign direct investment is welcome. But the pressures that will place, inflationary pressures that it will place on India, and again the pressures that it places on our currency, as our currency begins to strengthen and therefore affect our export prospects. These are very complicated questions that economists have to sort out, and we are told that Brazil is doing it in one way, the United States is doing it in another way, Japan is doing it in yet another way, and the Chinese are doing it in a way that nobody seems to understand. But that's because they speak a different language, by the way. So I think ultimately it boils down to how will we understand each other? Do we mean the same thing? And I want to give you an example of language. I was once speaking to Senator Moynihan, and we were discussing some disagreement that had happened between us and our neighbor, Pakistan, at the Human Rights Commission. And as I was giving him the story of how things developed, at one stage I said Pakistan was going to table a resolution. And he said, so? And I said, well, that worried us because they were going to table a resolution against us. And he said, well, why should that worry you? And I said, well, but that's the beginning of the fight. And he said, no, tabling a resolution means that's the end of the fight. And I said, no, in my country, when you table a resolution, you begin a fight. He said, well, in my country, when you table a resolution, you say the fight's over. And so just tabling a resolution was different from the American point of view and the Indian point of view. And then we went on to the tomato syndrome. Then I realized that quite often when we are saying something to each other in ostensibly the same language, although Bernard Shaw will say that you don't speak the same language, because I think those of you who've seen that beautiful film, Pygmalion, would remember the song where Professor Higgins says the Americans haven't spoken it for years. He says, why can't the English teach their children how to speak? And then goes on to say, well, the Americans haven't spoken it for years. We take pride in saying that we are the best speakers of the English language. And certainly most of the awards that are given now for best writing in English in the world, and recognition is given to Indian writers and Indian authors. So we should really be able to understand the language in which concepts have developed the world over. But we have our own concepts. We have our own concepts and our own ideas of democracy, on affirmative action, on what we call the reservation system. And critically, I believe, there is a major difference between our idea of affirmative action and your idea of affirmative action, if I am not incorrect entirely. Our idea of affirmative action is largely based on doing justice for injustices done in the past, to rectify the injustices of the past, whereas many of your Supreme Court judges have spoken of affirmative action as being good for the present generation, not necessarily for doing right for the wrong done in the past, but something that is essentially analytically good for the present. So affirmative action gives you a better society at present.